Alex. Thanks for having me on.
Doug, I told you before we started, this is a topic that I cover a lot on the podcast because I really like to cover it. It's something that I'm super interested in learning more about how to become a better leader. I told you as we were getting going here that I didn't become a manager or a leader by choice. It was sort of just, well, the business grew and we added a person here and a person there. And as I stated to you, now we have 40 people. So you sort of backdoor into those skills by doing a bunch of things wrong. So I'm interested to hear your take after having worked with a lot of different people about how to become a better leader. Some of your ideas, but why don't you just introduce yourself and then we can go back to the beginning, and I want to hear how you got into this field.
Pleasure again to be here. The topic of leadership has been part of my DNA for a very long time. I guess I was kind of born into it in a fashion, and we have a joke in my family about me being the captain of the fifth grade crossing guard in school. Back in my day, we allowed students to be the crossing guards at the elementary school, literally sending 10 and 11-year-old kids out into traffic with stop signs, asking cars to stop so the other kids could cross.
Those are things that would never fly nowadays.
Today, that would not be a thing anybody would allow, I know, but the point is it gave me an opportunity to take on a role of leadership at a very early age. And that's kind of been part of my DNA my whole life. I subsequently kept climbing the ladder, if you will, in student leadership positions all through my school years. I was commissioned an Army officer out of college and went on active duty for a while, did that, left there and was recruited by a large regional bank. I hail from the Houston area. And at the time, there was a very large regional bank operating here. They invited me to come join their management team. So I kind of went straight into a management role, straight out of the Army, and have been in various management leadership roles ever since. But in parallel with all that, there's kind of another part of my DNA that has to do with entrepreneurship. And I got that from my dear mom. She started her own business, and I didn't know what entrepreneur was at the time. We didn't call it that. She just was a private business owner and turned it into a nice little profit center for us. We had a great lifestyle because of it and thoroughly enjoyed it. But I saw the kind of the independence aspect of it, the opportunity, the flexibility she could create for herself, and it just stuck with me. So after many years in corporate with the big bank game, I went through 2 large bank mergers, ultimately becoming part of the JPM Chase family. I did take an early retirement and went into consulting, which was my own venture at Entrepreneurship. I just hung a shingle and started doing consulting work, built that up. Got involved with 4 other entrepreneurial startups along the way, and about 16 years ago, turned all of my attention to coaching, becoming a certified executive coach and helping other managers learn how to be better leaders. That's it in a nutshell.
What did mom do for her business? Because it sounded like it went well.
It was. She was an interior designer by trade. She had a natural gift for it. She had a wonderful eye for style and color, and spent part of the business, the early years, she was doing residential. So she was helping people remodel and redesign home settings. She got tired of that because the residential market is really tough to serve.
Mm-hmm. Those dang customers, I know about them. I know about them.
She was invited to do a commercial project it involved an architectural firm in San Antonio where we were living at the time. And it turned out, I don't know that she knew it even at the time, but they were one of the most successful architectural firms. They had probably had a staff of about 40, and that's kind of a big deal if you're an architect. And she helped redesign a new office property that they built.
What did you learn from her?
Well, I've actually got a keynote that I do, 10 things I learned from a single mom about business. And among those things, she was the first person in my life that taught me the old adage. I've learned subsequently a lot of people believe in it, but it's don't let them see you sweat. You're going to have challenges in what you do, and you don't want the people around you seeing you, demonstrate some fear and anxiety about what may be happening. You got to power through it. And it's not at all a fake it till you make it, but it's, muster up your courage, steel your nerve, and plow forward and keep going. And so it was that kind of dogged determination. She had another mantra that she taught me. She said, get to know your banker. And that's maybe why in the back of my mind, I ended up becoming a banker, because that was a principle that she believed in. And she did. She had a local banker that was always on her side.
So my question is, how much do you think is nature versus nurture there?
Well, it's a great question, and I tend to be I'm too easily swayed to get a little geeked out on stuff like that, and so damn you for bringing it up. Back to our core topic on leadership. There have been for decades raging debates: are leaders born or bred? And specific to your question, I don't know. Yeah, probably there's something in my genes about it. Her dad, my grandfather, was an entrepreneur. He had his own business his whole life. So she probably got it from him, and then I probably got it from her. So yeah, I mean, I think that could be a real thing. But part of it, though, I think that is also true, and this would probably be more the nurture part of it, is when you see somebody doing it successfully, you're going to learn about how to do it and what you should be doing, and you kind of can't avoid that learning. But I think maybe the more genetic based propensity would come from being willing to do it when it's your turn and there's an opportunity that opens up. Because I've certainly met and know a lot of people who grew up the child of an entrepreneur, and they will tell you the last thing they're going to do is take over that business.
Sort of like a negative role model.
It's a negative role model.
Yeah. Dad's an alcoholic. I never want to be like that. I never drink. Even if you may have a genetic predisposition, like in similar ways. Yeah, you hear that story often. And to your point that you said earlier before we started this call, you can get better at being a manager. You can get better at being a leader.
Absolutely. The one caveat, I mean, I fundamentally agree with everything you just said. The one caveat, though, is this, and I can promise you from my years of doing this, it is the deal breaker on coaching or leadership development, and that is the person coachable?
Yeah.
If you tell me you're hiring me to fix somebody on your team, I'm out. I'll tell you a quick story on that note. I had an engagement several years ago. A very large global brand asked me to come in and facilitate a first-time managers course that they had. They had a book. They had this giant 6-inch ring binder of content they wanted new first-time managers to consume. They needed a facilitator to page through the book and lecture and speak and talk about it. It was a classic onboarding, if you will, for a new job description. So anyway, I go to the appointed date and time. I've got my book in hand. I walk into this room. There's about 60 of these folks. It was a big company, and they did it in giant waves. They did these picks and promotions. And so I got this audience out there, and I go through the first hour of stuff, and it was time to have a break. And next thing I know, there's a line at the podium. All these people are standing there. Very first guy says, if what you just said in the first hour is what I got to do, I'm out. I want to go back to being an engineer. And I'm going like, okay, well, sorry. Why don't you step over here? Let me take the next question and see what's going on.
I'm going to need to have that conversation like a little later.
Whole line had that same question.
No.
And so I excused myself. I got on the phone with the HR lady who had brought me in. I said, Sue, and that wasn't her name, but I'll use it. I'll say, Sue, you got a problem.
So maybe I have a lot of questions here, but maybe how do you coach people to avoid that trap, right? Because if someone is kicking butt, I want to continue to give them opportunity. Normally, they're kicking butt because they want more opportunity. It's sort of a chicken and an egg problem, right?
Yeah,
Like, so
absolutely.
when people come into our company, I tell them very clearly, I want you to make more money. I want you to move up. If those are the things that you want also, here is our roadmap. Here are the 6 things that you need to do in the first 60 days, 90 days, 180 days that will help you when you get to those next reviews say that you are doing a great job. Doug, you're great. Your enthusiasm, check, great. Your speed of work, great. So when I encourage those things to happen, I want to give those people more opportunities. But how do I avoid running into that problem where I bring Doug on, Doug does great, I promote him to manager, and he hates it?
I think I got the question. Yeah, part of it, I think, is in the selection process of deciding who needs to be your next team lead or next promote up. There does need to be some intentionality about what you're looking for, and I coach this and I do this in my business advisory work. I tell business owners that every box on your org chart needs to be written without any names or personalities associated with it. You need to basically write the job description for that box to define what contribution of value is that box going to give to the company.
That's really interesting.
So if you design your optimized org chart first, then start looking for candidates that are going to fulfill, a high percentage of that requirement in that box. Obviously, ideally, you want 100% fulfilled, but it's not a perfect world. You might get 95, you might get 90, but you better have 90. I mean, it shouldn't be a 75 or a 60.
So that description of the job might be chief operating officer, and then maybe like their responsibilities. Like,
Yeah.
Covering all operations of the business, which for us involves logistics, shipping of orders, purchasing of product, moving it through the process.
Right.
Then would you want to list like the skills that are pertinent?
I think so. Yeah, I think you need to identify the pertinent skills, and most importantly, and this is where it gets sticky, is think about the best behaviors that can fulfill that. Does this person need to be outgoing and, extroverted, or is a academic introvert a good personality to put in that job?
Do you have any suggestions on how to create that box, things that you've seen work well, or ways to pair personalities with like job descriptions? Do you have any tricks or tips for that?
Yeah, well, let me break that down. So it's a multi-step process, but again, I argue that it starts with drawing the boxes first. Ultimately, not have any box on the chart that's just an accommodation or a convenience for somebody, because when you started your business, you asked Uncle Bob to help you, and he's been faithful and willing, and he's been there all along. But now the business has grown to a certain size and he doesn't really quite fit in anymore. What are you going to do with Uncle Bob?
That's a difficult problem. We have a couple Uncle Bobs we love, and some of them contribute at a really high level, but some of them contribute at lower levels.
Well, that's the entrepreneur's lament. And just about anybody that has done a bootstrap operation has had that in some form or fashion. But the challenge is, as the company does in fact mature and grow, and you move from startup to grow up phase and then grow up to scale up phase, your dynamics of how those boxes interrelate change. And you can't just drag it along, pull it along with you, however you started.
What about like identifying personalities within an organization, whether they're already within your organization or they're thinking about coming into your organization? I haven't had anybody really give me a concrete answer about like any personality testing or personality tests that they have used that have been successful. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I do have some thoughts on that, and I do apply these and deploy these in my coaching business. There are many great personality tests out there. And genesis of the old original personality testing was the classic 4-blocker that it was all of them are rooted in Carl Jungian psychology. And the theory is there's 4 basic personality types, and you see them called different things or named different things. But the popular ones that are used is the DISC
I've heard that
method
one.
or the Myers-Briggs. Companies spend big bucks to bring facilitators in to administer these things, and everybody gets their little sticker that, you're red, yellow, blue, or green. And every one of those facilitators and the certified licensees administering those tests will tell you the purpose is to help you have an appreciation for the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm blue and you're red, I'm supposed to learn how red thinks. I'm supposed to be a little more open to stepping over into your box, getting out of my blue box and stepping into your red box so you and I can work better together. But 180 degrees opposite happens after the facilitator leaves.
They kind of like do the classic like team up thing.
Well, it becomes weaponized.
So this guy's red. You can't talk to him. He's
going to be hard to talk to. He
it's
doesn't
almost
understand us.
Self-reinforcing that one time Doug had a difficult conversation with you, and you're like, oh, well, Doug's red. So yeah, he's just like, you just really can't have a conversation with him without him getting upset.
Yeah. What you can do is you can map back to my org chart box thing that I was talking about. When you say my ideal candidate needs these attributes, you can list off the attributes, and there's a long pick list that this tool provides you to choose from. You can pick the critical elements that you think would define success in that role, and then you administer this test to your candidate, and it will line up. It will show you where they are horizontally and vertically on scales of the probability of success for the role. And it does introduce some personality assessment measures, as well as a little bit of job history of other experience and background that the person may have. And you can line this thing up and say, well, you're going to be a good fit or you're not. And for instance, sometimes there are roles where you say to yourself, whoever's in this seat, they're going to have to be able to really deal with ambiguity. We just often don't know what we don't know about this piece of the business. And this person needs to be our air traffic controller. And there's going to be a lot of chaos and uncertainty. Well, as you can imagine, there's some really personality biases that either work or don't work in a situation like that.
Yeah. Another thing that I kind of was thinking as to why some of these personality tests would be good is we brought this gal on. She was like just fresh out of college and had never worked like a real job before. And we were like, not to say nervous, but we're like, well, this person's fresh out of college. I'm 33. She's like 21 at this point. So I'm like, there's just a gap in age there and a gap in experience. And she came in and immediately started kicking ass. And we're like, oh my God, like she's so organized. She's so conscientious. She's so thoughtful. She's so like attentive to the details. And I was just kind of thinking, wow, I really would love to hire like 5 more people just like her. But I don't quite know like what that thing is, right? So maybe if you could go back and say, hey, like our star employees in this role, when we look back at that test, they were whatever, they were blue or they were ENTJs or they were this kind of combination. Then at least, as I go out, I can say, hey, like these are kind of the skills and the personality types that I'm looking for that in past have worked. Not to say past performance is an indicator of future success, but it's at least a good start.
There have been a lot of tools that take that approach. They say, and the predictive index that I talked about does that as well. You can take an existing team and you can say these three people are my rock stars.
Mm.
I know they crush it every day. I don't know why. I'm not sure, but you give them the test, and inevitably there's a commonality in the profile that emerges. And you see these attributes that are laid out in the results that start to shape a profile that you say, oh, okay, that's the model for high success in this function. So now you flip that around and you say, okay, that's my requirement. I want to recruit people that fit this profile.
Mm.
And then you give that test to new candidates, and when you get an alignment and an overlap, then you know you've got a higher probability of success. Not, again, nothing's perfect, but you got a much higher probability of it working for you.
Where do you kind of counsel someone who is maybe just starting into management to like begin this process, and what are some of the key elements that they need to keep in mind?
Well, when I get a chance to talk to a first-time manager, I actually, surprisingly, I don't even start with the job description or anything. I try to make it really internal and personal. I try to challenge them with the discussion of it would be like, okay, Alex, you're this new manager. What do you think a good leader looks like? Have you ever thought about defining a good leader? And it's not uncommon. I get a little bit of a blank stare. Well, I don't know. Okay, well, let's start with something really basic. Think back. Think about people you're aware of, or maybe you worked for them along the way. Maybe you had some direct exposure to them, or you just know them from, they're a public figure, they're a sports figure, they're a historic figure. You read, heard, or saw something about a leadership attribute that you think is kind of cool. You say, I like that. If I could do some of that, that would be good. And how many of those attributes can you put on a list? If you cherry pick the best of the best, I mean, if you go for, Brian Tracy and John Maxwell and John Collins and, some of the others that are very hot and well respected, they all have a notion of a list of attributes.
Okay.
And the words are different depending on who you're talking to, but they often sometimes mean the same. And a lot of times you get things like, it starts to sound like core values and beliefs,
Yeah.
but it's things like honesty, integrity, trustworthy, communication, reliable, dependable, accountable, responsible. It can go on and on. I consider leadership to be a little bit like the game of golf.
Okay.
You've got 14 clubs in your bag per the regulation for, official rules of golf. And each one of those clubs is designed for a different purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And some are designed to hit the ball far and long, and some are designed to make it go really high up in the air but fall really short. And that's by intention. And the best golfers learn how to take each individual club and hit it multiple ways to get different outcomes depending on the situation.
That's why golf is so damn hard.
And that's why golf is so damn hard. And that's why good leadership is hard.
I agree.
You got situational change moment by moment when you're in a role of leadership. You've got people that, 4 days out of 5, they're going to show up and they're going to give you a certain level of performance. But on that 5th day, they show up and you go, what the heck? Who are you?
So let's say I've identified, doesn't have to be 14. I get it. That's a golf number. But let's say I have, 5 or 6. Hopefully it's not 14 because that's a lot of things I got to learn. Let's say I have 5 or 6 things that I think, hey, if I was a great leader, I would communicate with my team, good, bad, or ugly. I would be very transparent with them. I would be honest. I would stick to my word. I would, maybe do 2 or 3 other things. okay, I've got those core values. I've maybe written them down and I'm actually starting to remember them. How do I hone in on those particular things that I have chosen to use as sort of my leadership values?
Great question, and fairly simple answer. Be intentional.
Mm,
So what that means is, and my best practice that I recommend to people is find yourself 5 minutes at the start of every day. Look at your calendar, anticipate the meetings that have been scheduled, the encounters you think you're going to have, and think just for a minute, okay, in this situation, I'm going to be talking to one of my more sensitive employees. I'm not even going to put a gender on it. I'm going to just say I'm talking to one of my more sensitive employees. I want to dial it back a little bit. I want to be a little more empathetic, a little more compassionate, a little softer in the way I communicate what I've got to say. But right after that, I know I'm talking to Bill, and he's just, he's an old Marine. He's tough as nails. I can tell him anything and he'll be fine. And, we're going to just go with it. So, but it's that front end of the day, anticipating how your values, how those leadership principles might get called into play,
mm-hmm.
and try to do a little bit of mental prep for that moment. Then the other thing is, on the end of the day, book some time to evaluate how you did for the day.
Okay.
Did I hit the mark? Did I represent these principles and values in everything I did today? And if you say to yourself, "Oh yeah, that first meeting I crushed it. I was right on the mark. Everything went the way I wanted it to. It was a good meeting. We got everything done. Gold star." But then the next meeting you go, "Ugh, man, I had a chance to be more present with my person and I wasn't. I got triggered to go somewhere in my attitude and in my message that I regret doing." And when you're doing that evaluation, you may even decide, you know what, I need to go back tomorrow. I need to revisit this thing with that person.
Maybe apologize, maybe tell them
I missed
it
my
didn't come
mark.
out the way that you wanted.
It didn't come out the way I wanted it to. It's not what I believe I represent. So I need to go, set it right.
Well, what you just said there is something that I feel like a lot of people in leadership have a tough time doing, which is admitting that they didn't do a great job, or admitting that, like, hey, it didn't work the way that I wanted it to go. I personally think that endears your team to you. They go, well, Alex will admit when he makes a mistake. Like, he won't double down and be like, no, I didn't do that. It's like kind of toxic when you do that, to be honest.
Well, I tell the story. I had a chance a few years ago. I live in the Houston area. We've got a lot of oil and gas activity. I was working for one of the big oil companies, and I was working with one of the very senior executives who was responsible for really large scale manufacturing stuff going on. So I'm having a session with my guy, and I could tell he was a little bit distracted. I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "We just had an incident at such and such a location." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'm curious. When the plant manager called you, what did you say?" And he kind of got real sheepish and kind of tried to dodge the question, like, And anyway, long story short, it took me 3 or 4 tries. I pulled it out of him. I said, "What did you say to the guy?" And he said, "Well, fundamentally, I chewed his ass for having a mistake." And I said, "And how did that work?" And he said, "Well, I'm not sure it did much of anything." And I said, "No. And when you were one of those plant managers and your senior, the guy that was in your seat now, when he chewed you, how did that make you feel?" He said, "I just knew it was part of the game. I knew I had to have my moment in the barrel, and, I had to deal with it." And I said, "So why do you do it that way now?" And he thought a minute and he said, "Because I guess that's the way I was taught."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay, guess what? You're now the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to keep doing that?" He said, "No, I really don't." And I said, "Okay, what are you going to do the next time a phone call comes?" And he said, I'm going to have compassion and empathy, and I'm going to coach. And I said, good. I said, let's see what happens. Well, about 90 days later, I got a call from their HR director, and she said, what have you done with my guy? I said, what do you mean? And she said, the plant managers love him to death. And it's the first time in this history of this company that plant managers are engaged with the senior exec that way. And I said, good. That's progress. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, there's this quote that I'm trying to find by Nick Saban, and it's something along the lines of negative experiences without the associated teaching are a breeding ground for toxicity. And I was like, whoa, like that's a great one, because essentially, like, what it sounds like you're discussing is like negative experience and there was no teaching associated with it. It was just, Doug, you bitch. And then it's like, okay, well, what did I learn? Don't do that again. That's like pretty much all you learn. That's a breeding ground for toxicity. And you could totally see how that's totally true with like young football players. And every once in a while, you do see like that coach like on the sideline, like really yelling at a young player, which, you know, that might be partially the environment. Who am I to say that's a good thing or a bad thing? But okay, so you've got your core leadership principles. You are starting to like come in contact with them and become familiar with them. How do you kind of coach people to then go through like, okay, bad thing happened. I know you said you kind of will recap the day or think about it in the moment, but are there like little tips and tricks that you can say like, okay, I have to have a hard conversation with somebody, like, how would you coach someone up on going into those types of situations as a manager? I think it's real easy to like pat somebody on the back. A phrase that I love is catch people doing the right thing. But communicating the wrong thing seems to be a lot harder, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, that notion of having a tough discussion with an employee is one of the biggest challenges of being a manager and leader in the modern world. But the thing that I advise people to consider is the decisions are often tough because the expectation or the standard was never really communicated properly. You assume too much.
Oh, gosh, that's one of my favorites. Well, I shouldn't have to tell Doug. He should know that he has to do that.
That's right.
That is
That's
like,
right.
when I hear that phrase, it's like a bright light just went off and somebody took a highlighter to that phrase. Like, okay, there's your problem.
Those early discussions need to include not only expectations, but you need to talk about obligations. And both parties, employee, employer, both need to state their view of expectation and obligation. Is anybody counting on you for doing that? That's the mark of a master. When you become the go-to person on that thing, because you know it so well, you've done it so well. And you could make an argument nobody gets promoted until they've mastered all of the things in their current job description.
Yeah, to me, the management thing is the hardest thing to master. That's almost like, I don't know if you can master that.
Well, I was going to say, shifting gears a little bit, back to the idea of picking 5 or 6 or maybe 10 attributes in your leadership tool bag that you want to work on and master. About the time you get them all starting to look like mastery, where they show up in your day-to-day kind of more as automatic, sixth sense kind of thing. You don't have to think so hard about making it right. They just happen. About that time, you might either you get promoted by the organization or the circumstance, and you realize there's a whole nother level. It's kind of like, gamification. There's a whole nother level. You get through the cave, and now there's a whole new level of challenge that's behind that door. You're going to be introduced to the need for several other attributes that you haven't yet had a chance to work on or work with. And that's what makes the leadership journey a lifelong learning process.
How different do you view management and leadership? Maybe talk to me about what you view the difference of those things
Oh,
to be. Are
great
those
question.
interchangeable or no?
Great question. No, they're not. When I first started coaching, I used to ask people the question, is there a difference between management and leadership? And at first, it was a stumper of a question, but over time, I guess people got more enlightened. There's been a lot more dialogue about it. And now I don't ask the question that way. I just assume everybody agrees there is a difference between management and leadership. So I ask, what do you think the difference is? And I'll get various answers. But the best way I sum it up is a simple phrase that says management is about process, but leadership is about people. Managers can be great at executing process, and people can make a whole career out of doing nothing but executing process.
Mm-hmm.
Hit
Packages
the
need shipped.
numbers, push
Somebody's
the volume, make budget, get it done all day long. The problem is when you look at the bigger picture of what's going on in that situation, you probably have employee turnover. You probably have a high degree of churn, and you probably have a lower margin on your outcome than you could have if your operation was a little more efficient. Because everybody agrees that turnover is expensive. When you have to retrain or train a new person, you've got downtime.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're spending dollars on salary and payroll that aren't going anywhere and aren't producing anything for you.
Well, there's definitely that, Doug, but also the thing that I think actually is under talked about is when you are needing to replace a person that is lost, you're just staying at stasis. Like you cannot grow when you are losing people
Exactly.
that you previously had. So if you want to take your business from 1 million to 2 million and you just lost 3 people, well, now I have to retrain and hire 3 people. It's like, how is that going to go to 2 million? You're going to need to hire more people to go to 2 million. So
Exactly.
actually what you need to hire is 5 people, not 3 people, because you want your business to grow. Nobody wants their business to slide backwards.
Right.
So it's kind of like this concept of like reoccurring revenue. Like you want to be able to go out and sell the revenue in 2024 and keep it in 2025 and keep it in 2026 and keep it in 2027. That's how a $1 million business turns into 2 and 5 and 7 and 12. Like those businesses that you have to go out and keep like, you know, eating what you kill. I've been in those businesses and those are really hard businesses to be in. And that's exactly what's happening when you turn your employees over is like you've become an eat what you kill type business where you constantly have to go out and hire and train. And
totally agree.
If you can't
totally agree. So it begs the question, can leaders be managers? And the answer is yes. Yes. You know, a good leader who is going to be effective at the inspiration and motivation of people should become a good manager of the processes.
That's fantastic, Doug. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Alex. I really enjoyed the time.
Thank you.